West Hill United is a progressive spiritual community where how you live is more important than what you believe. West Hill United is a people, a place, an idea. We are a community living out of a progressive faith, striving to make a positive difference in our own lives, the lives of others, and the world. Join us Sundays at 10:30 a.m. or connect with us at any time.
In this video, Anne will be referring to a TED Talk that will be linked in the description below.
At the end of the readings, we customarily add the phrase, offered as wisdom for the journey, and we invite you to respond with the phrase, may we walk in its light. This is simply an invitation to participate if you wish to do so. Many people assume that good communicators possess an intrinsic talent for speaking and listening to others, a gift that can't be learned or improved. The reality is that communication skills are developed with deliberate effort and practice, and learning to understand others and communicate your ideas more clearly will improve every facet of your life. That statement is an introduction to the collaboration of three writers, Professor Matthew McKay, psychologist Martha Davis, and writer on mental health issues, Patrick Fanning. Their books, including Messages, the Communication Skills Book, are frequently used in public service organizations. The following is from their work. Listening is a commitment and a compliment. It is a commitment to understanding how other people feel, how they see their world. It means putting aside your own prejudices and beliefs, your anxieties and self-interest, so that you can step behind the other person's eyes. You try to look at things from the other person's perspective. Listening is a compliment because it says to the other person, I care about what's happening to you. Your life and your experience are important. Second and third reading, following our excerpts from Celeste Headlee's book, We Need to Talk, How to Have Conversations That Matter. Highly educated people also tend to place a great deal of value on logic and discount the importance of emotion. You can't win a debate with an emotional argument, of course, but conversation is not debate, and human beings are inherently illogical. We are emotional creatures. To remove or attempt to remove emotion from your conversation is to extract a great deal of meaning and import. And finally, in order to have important conversations, you will sometimes have to check your opinions at the door. There's no belief so strong that it cannot be set aside temporarily in order to learn from someone who disagrees. Don't worry, your beliefs will still be there when you're done. Offered as wisdom for the journey.
May we walk in its light.
I like that. Words and musically. Yeah. I'm going to introduce the TED Talk speaker now, Celeste Headlee. She's an award-winning journalist, professional speaker, and author of We Need to Talk, How to Have Conversations That Matter, and Do Nothing, How to Break Away from Overworking, Overdoing, and Overliving. She's an expert in conversation, human nature, reclaiming our common humanity, and finding well-being. Celeste frequently provides insight on what is good for all humans and what is bad for us, focusing on the best research in neuro and social science to increase understanding of how we relate with one another and can work together in beneficial ways in our workplaces, neighborhoods, communities, and homes. She's a regular guest host on NPR and American Public Media and a highly sought consultant advertising companies around the world on conversations about race, diversity, and inclusion. Her TED Talk, Sharing 10 Ways to Have Better Conversations, has over 23 million total views. I have contributed several of those views watching this many times over just to get a refresh. And Scott pointed out to me, it's only 11 minutes long, but it is just chock-block full of good information. And you can watch it and say, I think I do that. But probably more often you say, I know someone that does that. I know someone that does that. So you can relate to it in many ways. It was my daughter, as I mentioned earlier, who had thought that it would be a good idea for me to watch the TED Talk. And she was right, and I told her how much I loved it. And since I've had to go back to it and look at it again just to get a refresh, because I feel like I'm needing that in my conversation skills. But it's interesting because what it did do for her was it gave her permission to use the line, I can't be in this conversation right now, Mom. Because you'll see that there is a time that if you're really not in the conversation, then you've just got to get out of it, which is very true and fair. But I always thought that was funny. Anyway, Celeste is the recipient of 2019 Media Changemaker Award. She's the proud granddaughter of composer William Grant Still and the Dean of African American Composers. Very accomplished and a real great communicator and plain speaker. So, 10 ways to have a better conversation.
The topic we've been focusing on about conversation as a pleasure, as a challenge, and I just want to hone it in to take us into our next week, connected with the matter of our values, in the content of our conversations and in the manner in which we have them with each other, the purpose of the conversation, the tone of the conversations we have, the goal of the conversations we have. George Carlin, outrageously funny, said, I'm always relieved when someone at a funeral is delivering a eulogy and I realize I'm listening to it, which means he's still alive to hear that conversation. First PowerPoint slide, if you could, is what TED Talk speakers are given to prepare them for a TED Talk or to apply to give a TED Talk. And the circles there, the top circle is what the world needs to hear. So you better come to a TED Talk application with something the world needs to hear, at least that you think it does. And then on the left-hand side there is what you know. So if you're going to be a TED Talk speaker, you should be an expert in a subject. You should be able to communicate. And then the faint one on the right is what you care about. Not just what you know, but what you care about. And so that speaker exemplified to me exactly that she'd prepared that, what the world needs to hear, what she knows, and what she cares about. The conversation could be so ordinary, and she talked about that. She said that it used to be that conversations weren't so controversial. You talk about the weather, or health perhaps, but you didn't talk, I grew up, you didn't talk about politics or religion with any kind of public conversation. And the thing is, the conversations about the weather can get rather dull, especially if it's rather unchanging. And the conversations about someone's health can be very interesting for the first 5 minutes, but then you kind of wish there was more content to the conversation. So she's saying that today, just about, think about it, health, the weather, they aren't simple conversations anymore. They are complex and multi-leveled and controversial. And it doesn't take long in a conversation, if you're even talking to a stranger on the subway, before you can tell which way that's going, and it becomes more controversial. She put it that ordinary conversations can devolve into an argument very seriously. And so I'm asking us, as we're just reflecting a little bit on her message, to think of people in your own life that you already feel you have to really be careful if you're going to be talking about this with them. And it could be that they've already indicated to you that they're quite closed on that, or that they want to argue and you have to decide whether you want to be part of that again. But we've all had conversations which have that little edginess in them, is where is this going? What's going to happen with that? But also just the ordinary conversations of our life with our friends, with our people. And she mentioned a statistic from the Pew Research. And until I dug into this, I did not know why it was called the Pew Research. I thought it was based on churches with their pews, which was very simplistic of me, but that's the only thing I thought. So I looked it up because it just resonates with our values so beautifully. The Pew, P-E-W, he's already thought, thank you, from back there. The Pew Research Center is a charitable, nonprofit, nonpartisan think tank based in Washington, D.C., and it includes the following topics that it researches: politics, policy, international affairs, immigration, migration, race, ethnicity, religion, age, gender, family, relationships, economy, work, science, internet, technology, news, habits, and media. All of which would come under the topic of the speaker saying they could be controversial. But all they're doing is looking for the facts, because they believe the more we're in touch with facts that have been checked, the better we are able to understand the conversation that we're in. And so I'm very grateful for that. Their non-discrimination policy just rocked me. And I'm on committees to do with diversity and inclusion at work. It's so controversial with some people. But their policy on non-discrimination and their promotion of inclusiveness based their policy on these possible areas where people can be discriminated in for. So here's the list. Now watch out for this. Discrimination based on gender, race, color, creed, religion, national origin, ancestry, citizenship, age, sexual orientation, gender identity, personal appearance, political affiliation, marital status, familial status, genetic information, pregnancy, childbirth, related medical conditions, breastfeeding, veteran status, military status, physical or mental disability, medical condition, denial of medical and family care leave or pregnancy disability leave, protesting illegal discrimination, and any other characteristic protected by laws and regulations in the applicable jurisdiction, and they take meaningful steps to make sure their staff is very keenly aware of that people are discriminated for that enormous list I just heard, just read. I was blown away by that. Well, there's the study that she quoted, and she said they did a study of 10,000 American adults and found that people are more divided, more polarized than we've ever been in history. And she's so bang on with that. Less likely to compromise, and she deduced from that that it means we're not listening to each other. We make decisions about where to live, she said, based on what we already believe, and she's encouraging us to remain open a little longer. Someone named Franklin Jones once said, "One advantage to talking to yourself is that you know at least somebody's listening," which isn't even always the case if we're talking to yourself. She mentions another article, and I'm just digging into the organization she brought to us to support her plea for us to have better conversations. She also quoted an article from The Atlantic. And some of you have read articles from The Atlantic, you're familiar with that. But if you're not, it's a magazine, again, that features these values so beautifully. Articles in the fields of politics, foreign affairs, business, the economy, culture, the arts, technology, and science. It was started, and I did not know this, well, didn't know this. It was started in 1857 in Boston as, it was called the Atlantic Monthly, as a literary and cultural magazine that published leading writers' commentary on these subjects. But it honed in on the abolition of slavery, and that was one of the features of the articles of the Atlantic Monthly. The founders were these writers, and I'm sure some of you know some of them, and some of you may know all of these writers, but these were the founders of the Atlantic. Ralph Waldo Emerson, the transcendentalist preacher, the physician, author, and poet Oliver Wendell Holmes Sr., the educator and poet Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, who wrote more than just Hiawatha, if you grew up learning his poem in school. Harriet Beecher Stowe, the abolitionist who wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin. And the author, the anti-slavery poet, James Russell Lowell, the writer Francis Underwood, who had worked in Kentucky for 10 years and couldn't any longer at that time handle the hatred the lack of hatred for slavery, and he became an ardent supporter of something called the Free Soil Party, which didn't last long in the States. The Free Soil Party was saying that every bit of soil in America on which anyone stood, they should be free. It was a party, a political party put to that. And he launched a magazine. It didn't last very long. But the last member I wanted to tell you about was John Greenleaf Whittier, the Quaker poet. There's a Quaker amongst us, some on the screen as well, whose only schooling came from 6 books his dad had in the home about Quaker history. And he learned that. A teacher encouraged him to write poetry, which he did, and William Lloyd Garrison, the abolitionist writer as well, gave him a start, gave him jobs, gave him editing. His young picture is the first, oh, you're there with me. That's his picture when he was young. He tried politics, but then he really realized his way to change the world about slavery was to write poems. And he published, the next slide is the pamphlet called Justice and Expediency, which angered people and also overjoyed them that this was getting published. It sealed his commitment to saying, I will use my conversations, I will use my literature, I will do readings, I will speak with people about this. And he was a founding member of the Anti-Slavery Society, and his biggest moment was when he signed this next document, the next picture. The next PowerPoint is the anti-slavery document, and he considered it the most significant part of his life. And as he continued to write for the Atlantic, and his poems in the Atlantic, he influenced that paper the most strongly to include issues of freedom for whatever that was, wherever people were not free. The next picture is him as an older man in his study. His health dissipated, but he did more writing. During the Civil War, he wrote with and for Abraham Lincoln with an ethical tone mixed with his emotion. So he used conversations, and they ended up in the Atlantic, which he quoted. But I wanted to give you one more picture. The next picture is a statue in, in California. I can't remember the name of the town, where a statue, it's called Whittier. They named it after him, Whittier, California. And this statue had been sitting there for a long time, honoring him as a poet and as an abolitionist, as the Quaker city was named after him. And the statue was vandalized one weekend, and it hit the paper that this statue was defaced with the words Black Lives Matter and an expletive accusing this white statue man of being a slave owner. And the reason I'm including this in there is because these people that were protesting hadn't had the conversation long enough to realize that Whittier was an abolitionist, and he was not a slave owner. And so they published something in the paper to say there was more to this story than these people realized. But the layers of it got even richer when I found online the newspaper announcement that said that this had happened. And it gave a history of Whittier. And they cleaned it up, and that's a picture of them cleaning the statue up. But the paper said, and I thought this honored the history of the Atlantic, the paper said, however, there's more to this conversation by saying, oh, these people made a mistake and they defaced the statue. Because what are the issues under that? And so they said, while Whittier is celebrated for his poetry and his activist legacy, there are numerous African-American poets and activists of his era that we hardly hear about. And so they brought another level into that conversation. Not good to deface a statue, not good to be wrong about why you did it because you didn't do the research, but let's look at the issue. So to me, it was a perfect example of the layers and layers and layers. And the speaker on the TED Talk quoted from the Atlantic, a perfect quote to match that. Kids spend hours each day engaging with ideas, but rarely do they have an opportunity to hone their interpersonal communication skill, to learn more from each other. So, all I'm going to do is, with the next slides, review for you her points, because you see Anne was suggesting you take notes, but you didn't bring paper and pencil, so I've got them for you again. And they're so succinct, and if we could remember them. So the number one, I want to introduce with a quote from Carl Menninger. If you have read, Carl Menninger was a psychologist, psychiatrist writing years and years ago. He said this, I love this. Listening is a magnetic and strange thing. A magnetic and strange thing, a creative force. The friends who listen to us, I'm going to stop, and you're going to think of one who does. The friends who listen to us are the ones we move toward. When we are listened to, it creates us, makes us unfold and expand. Love that. And I'm going to ask you just to think of someone that you know that when you're talking with them, you feel that connection, that being listened to in your heart. I'm also going to ask you now to think of someone that doesn't happen with. And you try, but it doesn't happen well. And you can feel that block. And that's what the speaker's trying to encourage us to get rid of, that block in there. And then I want you to imagine that maybe once or twice, I was the person, you were the person that wasn't listening well to someone. And when you really think about what that might have done to that person, you say, oh, I need to do that better. I didn't mean to shut them down, but my poor listening in that moment may well have done that. And it matters. Of course it matters. So, number one on her list. Number one, don't multitask. Be present. Very simple. You all know someone that listens while they're typing. They're not totally listening. Or listens while they're mixing. I were looking at the recipe. You probably think I'm describing somebody, but and probably I am. But we all do it with that. So how that relates to our values is so clear. Be present. Dalai Lama said, when you talk, you are only repeating what you already know. But if you listen, you just might learn something new. Her second point, don't pontificate. I wouldn't suggest that you say that to someone you don't think is listening to you. Don't pontificate. It sounds a bit lofty, but don't just present your opinion. Be ready to learn. I think she said if you want to state your opinion with nobody interrupting you and nobody disagreeing with you, write a blog. Write a blog or make a speech or record your message on someone's voicemail. You can go on forever. They may not listen to it, but you have had your say. Now, the complication is sometimes it's hard for you to be listening to something that's so controversial for you and your values are at stake, so you want to rush in with your statement. And she's asking us to just listen a little longer and not be ready to give our speech. Number 4, go with the flow. Go with, I would put it, their flow. Be able to hang in with someone's conversation long enough. Don't stop listening because it's boring and you're crafting your reply to make it more interesting. If that's the conversation, it should have been over a while ago. But if you're in it, do that. If you've stopped listening, you've stopped learning. Number 5. Did I miss number 3? It was intentional. No, it wasn't. I missed number 3. Yes, use open, they caught me there. Good, thank you. Use open-ended questions. You know what they are? They're a question that can't be answered with yes or no, or a very short thing. And I think she gave a great example to say, how was that for you? Instead of saying, the perfect social worker, you must have felt very badly. No, stop. Ask, how did that feel? And then be really ready to get an answer. I don't know how many times in counseling and therapies, I knew what they were feeling, so I gave them a chance to say it, and that's wasn't what they were feeling at all. Not at all. And either I was wrong or they were wrong. It had to be me that was wrong because they knew what they were feeling. So thank you, Dan. He was staying in the conversation. Thank you. You were with me on that, and I wasn't. Number 4 was go with the flow. Don't stop listening to prepare your reply. Number 5, if you don't know, say that you don't know. That is so hard and so important. But it's an admission of our fallibility. If we are fallible, therefore be humble. You could be so wrong. I'm going to ask you again to remember a time when you've been in a conversation and you were right and you knew it because we enter that way. And as the conversation went on, or you did some reading after, you think, oh my goodness, I was wrong. Sometimes you can go back to the person and keep going with that. Sometimes they were on the subway and you don't even know who they are and they're gone. But to be able to say, of course I'm fallible, of course I could be mistaken. I could be quoting an expert that's wrong. And I feel so sure because of that. But ready to be wrong. Someone named Ed Cunningham said, friends are those rare people who ask how we are and actually wait to hear the answer. They ask how we are and they wait to hear the answer. I don't know about other countries or other provinces or other areas, but at my workplace, we tend to say, hi, how are you? Very quickly, hi, how are you? And so does the other person. But we're all moving fast in my workplace, so we're walking down the halls. I think I've mentioned this before. And so we see the person, so I say, hello, how are you? And so now we keep walking, and this person says, hello, how are you? So that now it's here, and they've turned the corner, and I say, fine, thank you, to nobody at all, because the hall is empty now. Or I'm looking at someone new who wonders why I told them that out of the blue. I'm fine, thanks, in case you were asking. And so we aren't really prepared to. I wish we could, hi, nice to see you, or hi, have a good day, or something. But the how are you question. A friend is a rare person who asks how we are and then waits to hear the answer. Number 6 is a hard one. Don't equate your experience with theirs. Now, I think the key word there is equate. It doesn't mean we can't engage and eventually share, I went through something similar to that. That's a beautiful share. But to equate it, to say, I know what you feel because I've been through the same thing. And the speaker on the TED Talk said it's not the same. It won't be the same. It wasn't the same. Don't assume it's the same. I know how you feel because I've been through it. I know, and we feel we're being empathic, and that's fine as long as we're then ready to hear from that person that their experience wasn't like ours. I think I've mentioned before, Hallmark cards used to have 2 different kinds of greeting cards to send to someone that's got a divorce. And one of the type of cards says, in sympathy and sadness with your loss. And the other kind of card says, congratulations on your freedom. And if you sent it to the wrong person, if you sent it to someone sad, this happened. I knew this had happened with someone. And I'm not saying this is the best thing that ever happened to me was this. So we can't assume. Don't equate your experience with it. Don't equate. It's not the same. Number 7. I liked my slide. Oh, number 7. Try not to repeat yourself. Try not to repeat yourself. I hope I don't do this, and if I do, please come to me. I tend to go by the look on your face, not here in the speech, because I get to, but when we're just talking, I tend to watch your face to see if you're getting what I'm saying. And if your face does not tell me in a beautifully rich and clear way that you're on this conversation with me, I think I haven't been clear enough. Because if I was clear, you'd be astonished at this point, or you'd be deeply into it. So I will rephrase it. I'll paraphrase ad infinitum till I see a look. Now, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but repeat doesn't necessarily make the point any better. So she's saying, don't repeat yourself. Try not to do it. She did say we do it a lot. Number 8, stay out of the weeds. I'm telling you a story, or you're listening, I'm listening to your story, and I say, it happened to someone I know. What was his name? Oh, it's on the tip of my tongue. I'm trying to remember his name so I can tell you his name. Why can't I remember? Just go on with the story. Doesn't matter with the name. Or that's just like many years ago. I think it was 1972, or maybe it was 1973. I think it was the same year I was working at, no, that's not right. And you are wading through the weeds with them until they find a date that doesn't matter. Unless for some odd reason it really does. She says, stay out of the weeds. Then she gives number 9, and she says, it's not the last one, but it's the most important one. Listen, mouth closed, ears open. Doug Larson is one of the funniest, cleverest, most outrageous comic writers. The Far Side is his books of clever stuff. And he said, wisdom is the reward you get for a lifetime of listening when you would have preferred to talk. Wisdom is the reward you get for a lifetime of listening when you would have preferred to talk. And she gave such a good advice with this. Why do we not listen? Number 1, we'd rather talk. And she said, when I'm talking, I'm in control. I don't have to hear anything I'm not interested in. I have the power. And so real listening with love, with kindness, with compassion, is willing to give up that power and share it with the other person having the conversation. And you know when that's happened to you, when you feel someone's not overpowering you, they're actually trying to engage you because it matters. It feels wonderful. It feels loved. It feels cared for. It feels like we matter. And then she goes on to the last point. She says, be brief. So I was brief. Do you see my little tiny be brief? Be interested in other people, but be brief. To take all her points together. And this quote I found, nobody claimed it. So whoever said it was deeply wise. And that person said, speak in such a way that others love to listen to you. It's the first part of the statement. Speak in such a way that others love to listen to you. And listen in such a way that others love to speak with you. Just take that one and live it. Speak in such a way that others love to listen to you. And listen in such a way that others love to speak with you. What a beautiful ideal, beautiful goal, beautiful thing to reach towards, which is why when we always say we're here to learn wisdom with each other, means we're on a journey, and it doesn't matter if this was your occupation as a communicator. We need to at least dig into this type of thing as often as Anne has listened to the TED Talk. So to learn that. And I love to just end with her statement. She's talked to so many people. She says, prepare to be amazed. And I'm going to suggest that if you're practicing these things and you're getting a little more comfortable with them, then be amazed at yourself too. Be amazed at your own growth in that. But be amazed at what can happen when two people talk, not past each other, but deeply with each other. I'm going to ask Babette to lead us in our very brief sending song about love.
Become a sustaining champion of West Hill United's work by committing to an automatic monthly donation. Learn more or donate now through Canada Helps.